Formula One rules and regulations, explained. The concept behind Formula One is simple. The first car to cross the finish line on the final lap wins the race. There is no set number of laps, but the length of the race must exceed 305 kilometers, or approximately 190 miles. The starting lights consist of 5 pairs of red lights on a traffic light board to signify when the first lap begins. When the final pair of lights is turned off, the race begins. The objective of Formula One racing is to score the maximum number of points by placing in the top 10 as well as to win individual races. Sprint sessions. Formula One has recently added sprint sessions, also known as sprint qualifying, to several race weekends. A sprint session is a 100 km mini race that takes the place of qualifying. Sprints are held on Saturdays, and their results set the field for the Grand Prix the following day. Like qualifying session order, the starting grid for a sprint session is determined by the time set during practice. There are 6 race weekends that include sprint sessions on the 2023 F1 schedule: the Azerbaijan, Austrian, Belgian, Qatar, United States, and Sao Paulo Grand Prix. Grand Prix. The Grand Prix is the main event of a Formula One racing weekend and takes place on the Sunday of the weekend. Before the race begins, drivers take one trip around the track in what is called the formation lap, which allows them to warm up the tires and address vehicle issues. When the final pair of red lights are turned off, the race has begun, and the drivers may accelerate away from the grid and onto the track. At this time, the green starting lights will be illuminated to signal active racing. The runtime of an F1 Grand Prix is not allowed to exceed 2 hours, excluding race suspensions. At the 2-hour mark, the driver who is in the lead once they pass the finish line is the winner, regardless of whether they have reached the final scheduled lap. The first 3 drivers to cross the finish line on the final lap will receive first, second, and third place, respectively. Each team can have no more than 4 drivers during the season and must enter 2 drivers for each race. These drivers participate in practice, qualifying, and the race. Both drivers' points are added to the final score for the team at the end of the Grand Prix. Drivers are assisted by pit crews, which consist of approximately 20 people who perform tire changes and quick maintenance during the race. Equipment. Open-wheel racing is a dangerous sport, so drivers must wear safety gear. Technical regulations. Most of the rules concerning drivers, teams, and races are contained in Formula One sporting regulations. The rules about how race cars must be constructed, the famous formula, from which the series derives its name, are contained in the technical regulations. Cars are required to be in compliance with the technical regulations at all times during race weekends and FIA-sanctioned testing sessions. Teams are required to submit full diagrams of all components to the FIA prior to all races and sessions to ensure they are in compliance. Flags. During Formula One races and practice sessions, race officials wave flags of different colors to send signals to the drivers. Race or session suspended. Yellow. Hazard or dangerous conditions on the track. Hazard or dangerous conditions on the track. Green. Full speed racing may resume. Driver disqualified. Black and white. Checkered. End of the race or session. The driver in the lead when this flag is waved is the winner. Fouls and penalties. Drivers and teams are penalized for breaking the rules. If drivers start too early, cause an avoidable accident, unfairly block another driver, speed in the pit lane, or commit other violations of the sporting regulations, they receive penalties. Time penalties require the driver to return to their pit and wait either 5 or 10 seconds, during which no work may be done, before returning to the race. Time penalties are imposed for pitting when not allowed, such as under a safety car. A drive-through penalty calls for the drivers to drive through the pit lane at reduced speed before rejoining the race. In the case of more serious infractions, stewards may assess harsher penalties, such as grid penalties, stricter time penalties, points on a driver's license, or driver suspension. The stewards may also reprimand drivers, and after 5 reprimands concerning driving infringements, they will automatically receive a 10-position grid penalty at the next race. Stewards work hard to determine whether a rule has been broken and which driver or team is to blame before assessing penalties. If a driver receives 12 points, they will have their super license suspended for 12 months or an entire season. If a driver uses more than their allocated number of power units, or if they have an unscheduled gearbox changed, they will receive a penalty. If a driver uses additional restricted number components, a 10-place grid penalty will be given for the first offense. Parc fermé rules keep cars under strict supervision before and after a race and prevent teams from making changes to a car during these times. Scoring and winning driver points are awarded based upon drivers' finishing positions in each Grand Prix. These points are used to determine the winner of the Drivers' Championship at the end of the season. During a race weekend, drivers participate in practice and qualifying sessions, which are used to determine their starting positions in the Grand Prix. 2 points 10th place. 1 point drivers, and their teams, can also earn an extra point for the fastest lap if they finish in the top 10. Rules of Formula 1 drivers and teams must adhere to the rules of F1, including the Code of Sportsmanship and the technical regulations. Cheating results in penalties or suspension. Drivers must wear helmets, shoes, gloves, hands devices, and race suits specifically designed for F1 races. Teams may use no more than 4 total drivers in races throughout the season. After 2 hours of green flag racing, if the allotted race distance has not yet been completed, first place is awarded to the driver in the lead. Drivers accumulate points toward the Drivers' World Championship and the Constructors' World Championship by finishing in the top 10 in Grand Prix. If there is a tie for the Drivers' Championship, the driver with the highest number of race wins is awarded first place. Drivers receive no points if fewer than 2 laps of green flag racing are able to be completed during the race. If more than 2 laps but less than 75% of the race is completed due to race suspension, and the race cannot be resumed, the top drivers receive reduced points based on how much of the race has been completed. This weight includes all components of the car, the driver, their race suit, helmet, and hands device. Drivers are not allowed to leave the race until they have been weighed as part of the post-race Parc fermé inspection.